Right now in eastern Georgia, investigators are working to learn what and who damaged the Georgia Guidestones. So far, we know part of the 42-year-old monument.
Have you ever seen something so big, so strange, you just had to stop and wonder, who built this and what does it mean? The Georgia Guidestones stood in a quiet Georgia field for more than 40 years. They were made of big stones and had 10 scary rules for people to follow. They were put there by someone, but no one knew why. But when they went off in 2022...
Tomorrow marks 1 year since the destruction of the historic Georgia Guidestones.
Yeah, the mysterious monolith stood on a field in Elberton for decades. So Tracy Amick-Pierre is going to show us where that investigation...
Everyone found out. Stay with me, because you're going to want to hear this. The monument that shouldn't exist. Something that could not have been built used to stand on a quiet field in Elbert County, Georgia. For more than 40 years, 4 huge granite pieces rose out of the red clay and cast long shadows over 5 acres of empty land. Nothing. No reasons given. No owner. There were only the Georgia Guidestones, big, cold, and quiet. Then, just after 4 a.m. on July 6, 2022, the silence broke. One blast tore through the monument, sending flying pieces of granite that broke up one of the slabs in an instant. The blast was so strong that it woke up people nearby, who ran outside to see what was shaking the ground so badly. They solved a secret that had been going on in their town for decades. The Guidestones were more than just a memorial. They looked like a message written in stone. Each piece of rock was over 230,000 pounds, which is as much as 2 giraffes and more than an elephant. The person who built it, however, set it up so perfectly that it could track the moon, the stars, and even the exact times of the summer and winter solstices. There was a hole in the middle slab that always faced the North Star. In the summer and winter, another hole lined up perfectly with the rising sun. At noon, light came through a small hole in the capstone and hit the middle of the floor below, which proved that it was the correct day. It wasn't just rock. It was a clock that was made to keep working even after everything else had stopped working. That's exactly what it did for 42 years. It was unveiled on March 22, 1980, which was set to coincide with the spring equinox. Hundreds of people were there, and as the covering cloth fell away, cameras flashed. It was even stranger than they thought what they saw would be. 10 guidelines for humanity were carved into the stone in big, bold letters. There are 10 rules that are written in 8 different languages besides English: Russian, Arabic, Hebrew, Hindi, Spanish, and Swahili. Like everyone was meant to read it. For good measure, the capstone also had 4 old writing systems, one of which was Babylonian cuneiform, hieroglyphs from Egypt, Greek and Sanskrit. It looked like it was made by people who had lived through a world disaster to show the next people how to rebuild. People were amazed by the engineering alone. Even people who work with granite all the time said they had never seen anything like it. It was over 19 feet tall, and each slab was exactly smooth, level, and arranged. It was much bigger and more purposeful than Stonehenge. The Guidestones were beautiful and precise, but they also had a dark weight to them. Because no one knew why or who built it, that was the part that made people angry. It wasn't long before people started coming. People drove for hours just to stand in its shade and take pictures. They ran their hands over the smooth granite and tried to figure out what the strange writing meant. Some people thought it was beautiful art. Some people treated it like a holy place. But a lot of people were afraid of it, and they were right to be. Thoughts turned into ideas over the years. So many people in the area called it America's Stonehenge, but not with joy. It became a lightning rod for anger and fear. It was called obscene by preachers. Some activists said it was satanic. There were many ideas going around about global plots and secret groups. There was disagreement about the purpose of the plaque. One thing, though, everyone agreed on. Years went by. The statue didn't move, not changing, not moving, looking at. And every time, someone asked, "Who built this? And what did they want?" It was always the same answer. No one knew. The day it fell, everything changed. There was still more to the story after the last slab was taken away that summer morning in 2022. It was just getting started. Because soon, everyone would know the real story behind the Georgia Guidestones. Who made it? What they thought. The message they left was much scarier than anyone thought. Because it all starts with the first rule, which was carved at the very top of the stone and gave everyone who read it chills. Keep the population below 500 million in constant balance with nature. Everything else about the Guidestones will never seem safe again after you figure out what that line really meant. The chilling message, carved in stone. At the very top of the Guidestones, in big block letters, was the line that scared me the most. A line that was so short but so heavy that it made people stop in their tracks. Keep the number of people below 500 million and nature in balance all the time. That wasn't help. That was a number. People were able to figure it out quickly. At that point, there were more than 7 billion people in the world. So the stones were saying that more than 90% of us didn't fit. You couldn't read that line without getting cold, because this wasn't written on a blog or in a notebook. It was cut out of rock and is meant to last for thousands of years. Someone, somewhere, believed in this idea so much that they paid a lot of money to have it written down in stone in a field in Georgia. If that was where they began, what did the rest of the rules really mean? No one felt safer after hearing the second rule. Make smart decisions about reproduction to boost fitness and diversity. If you don't think about it too much, that might sound like nothing bad. But words like fitness and guide set off red flags for anyone who knew their background. This was not a nice parenting advice. It was similar to eugenics, which was the crazy idea that the Nazis used to excuse sterilizing and killing millions of people they thought were not fit to live. There was more to it than just how many people should live. It was about who had the right to be alive. It got even worse when the next rule came out. Bring people together with a living new language. At first glance, that might have just meant finding a better way for everyone to talk to each other. But many people were curious about what it really meant. There would be only one language for everyone, which would mean the end of cultures, dialects, and practices that make us unique. Do not talk to each other, handle. What about the fourth one? Let reason guide your feelings, your faith, your traditions, and everything else. That one got to the heart of things even more. Anyone can take away your religion, your traditions, or even your feelings. Then, what's left, that is yours. It was about more than just how the world should be run. It had to do with how you should think, how you need to feel. The last part was the line that connected everything. Let all nations settle their own disputes within their own borders in a world court. A court for the whole world. A single spot where all disagreements are settled. One method. In charge of one government. Some people saw this as a sign of hope, a way to end fights and settle disagreements without killing anyone. For some, it sounded like the end of freedom. A quiet way for a small group of people to gain all the power. Personal rights and social duties should be balanced. The world should be protected, and truth and love should be valued. These were some of the rules that tried to soften the message. It didn't really matter at that point, though. The first few lines of that sentence told everyone what it was about. These were not kind suggestions for making tomorrow better. There was a plan here. It was hard for everyone to agree on what the Guidestones really meant for the future. Some people saw it as a message about the environment, telling us to live within our means and stop hurting nature before it hurts us. Some people saw it as a plan for a dystopia, a world where only a select few people could live and everyone else was just taken away. After that, the ideas got out of hand. People began to make sense of things. That number, 500 million, matched ideas put forward by the Club of Rome, a think tank that is accused of pushing for population decline to save resources. Talk of world courts and a single language sounded like it came from the Bilderberg Group, which has been accused for decades of trying to set up a new world order. It was impossible not to smell Rockefeller's Population Council when people talked about genetic fitness and controlling reproduction. Critics said that the council funded sterilization programs and chose poor countries for population control studies. The rumors got even worse that the stones were where witchcraft practices took place, that some blood and lights had been found there late at night, that the reason they lined up with the stars wasn't just for science, but also for ritual. It was clear that the builders weren't just wealthy people, they were also occultists with a hidden purpose. Which story you believed didn't matter. The message was clear, no matter how you looked at it. It wasn't only about balance, or peace. It had to do with power. The more people read the writing on those slabs, the clearer it became. Whoever wrote them thought people should be harmed, changed, and controlled, no matter what. Still, no one knew who for more than 40 years. No one knew who was brave enough to make this plan official. Few people knew the man's face, but he had such a strong faith in this vision of the future that he was willing to write it down, so that people who lived through the next big crash would always have it. That mystery was not brought up until the day the truth came out. The world found out that the man who called himself R.C. Christian was actually someone else, and that the real story behind the Guidestones was much darker and more dangerous than anyone had thought. The man who called himself R.C. Christian. In the middle of the hottest summer of 1979, a man walked into the Albertan Granite Finishing Company and changed the whole town. He wore nice clothes, spoke softly, and said his name was Robert C. Christian. His claim was that he spoke for a small group of loyal Americans who wanted to leave something behind. But what he suggested wasn't just strange. It had never been done before. He said that he planned to build a memorial, not just any building, one that was as big and important as Stonehenge, but with one important difference. It would send a message, a list of rules that would help whoever was left behind after the next big crash. He was ready, and he was serious. Under his arm, he brought detailed plans and a scale model. His plans took into account every star, every season, and every angle of the sun. These slabs weren't just for looks. They were actually working astronomical devices that could track the stars and tell time. Even though he was cool, what he wanted was very scary. He didn't just want the statue to be built. He wished it would last until the end of time. Joe Fendley, owner of the granite company, was shocked but careful. It was a huge, expensive, and dangerous project. He didn't trust banker Wyatt Martin very much, so he sent Christian to him. That was the start of the real talks. Christian was ready to pay, but he made one thing clear. No one could know his real name. Not just from people, from everyone. He agreed to let Martin know who he really was as long as Martin swore not to tell anyone, not to his family, not to the press, and not even after he died. We made one of the weirdest deals in modern American history when we shook hands. Martin was in charge of the money, the land, and the quiet building. Christian left just as quickly as he came in. After the 5 acres of farmland were bought and the papers were signed, he disappeared. He didn't show his face again. After the statue was put up for decades, no one could figure out who he was. There were a lot of conspiracy theories about the Guidestones, but Martin didn't say anything. The reporters asked. Makers of films begged. The researchers dug. Martin would not talk, though, every time. It looked like the secret died with him when he died in 2021. Martin wasn't careless, though. He left a metal box in the attic of his house. Everything was inside. Letters that were signed with Christian's real name, using receipts to track the money. There were even rough drafts of the writing and a scary plan for a second monument with even stricter rules. The name came out when the box was finally opened in 2025. The person who said his name was R.C. Christian was really Dr. Herbert Hinsey Kirsten. Kirsten was more than just a rich guy. He was a surgeon from Fort Dodge, Iowa. People knew and admired him, but he was deeply committed to the same disturbing ideas that his songs talked about. Kirsten was crazy about what he thought would happen to civilization one day. He thought that too many people living in the world was its biggest danger. He hated democracy and said it was just a passing illusion. He also thought that only genetically fit people should be able to have children, and that everyone else should be taken away or managed. He also didn't keep those views to himself. It was important to Kirsten that the guys around him shared his views. He was linked to physicist William Shockley, who won the Nobel Prize and publicly supported eugenics and segregation based on race. Kirsten also gave money to David Duke, who used to be the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, and his letters to Martin showed how far he was ready to go. In one letter, he explained why he picked Georgia as the site for his monument. He said it was a survivable zone because people could still live there after a nuclear war or the end of the world. He didn't just want the statue to stay up after it fell. He wanted it to show the people who lived how to rebuild. Martin drew a second, even bigger monument on other papers in his closet. He called it the Directive. The wording in this new one wasn't very poetic. It specifically called for genetic screening, forced sterilization, and area purges to keep resources. The blueprint for a new world order. The Guidestones were never meant to be the whole plan. They were just the start. Police found something much scarier in Wyatt Martin's attic than anything ever carved into granite. It was hidden among the letters and papers. A box with the title, The Directive. There were steps to follow, an outline, not written for people who survived a long-ago end of the world, but for people living now. A plan for changing the world during Kirsten's lifetime. This time, the message wasn't poetic or hard to understand. It was cold, clear, and scary. At the heart of the directive was population control, which went far beyond what was written in the Guidestones, which was already very scary. Kirsten suggested that governments should force all families with more than 2 children to get sterilized in order to preserve resource stability. He talked about a way to use genetic filtering to get rid of what he called inherited inefficiencies in people he thought were weak, unfit, or not worthy. That was not all. He also had plans for what he called regional cleansing after natural disasters. He said it himself. Post-catastrophe populations must be culled to sustainable levels to stop further collapse. Kirsten didn't see failure as a tragedy. She saw it as a chance to start over. The papers even showed that the Guidestones were never meant to be used by themselves. Kirsten had designed similar statues to be built in remote, stable places like Patagonia, Iceland, and Western Australia. which were picked because they don't have many people and don't have a lot of earthquakes. Each was supposed to carry up-to-date copies of the rules written in the main language of each area to teach future generations. All of those other statues were never built, but the fact that he planned them showed how serious he was. The World Future Council's name kept coming up in the Directive. A lot of people had never heard of it. It became clear that Kirsten had been very active with the small, invite-only think tank that worked quietly in the 1970s and early 1980s before going away. Meeting notes and letters showed that the group wanted international limits on population, an AI-based government to cut down on mistakes, and centralized courts to enforce rules for the whole world. He wrote that the council was decades ahead of its time and praised it. The council secretly broke up in the late 1980s, but some of its ideas lived on. These ideas seemed much less idealistic now that Kirsten knew what she was up to. That part was the scariest. When experts started to look at Kirsten's works, in light of current discussions in bioethics, climate policy, and public health, they found some troubling patterns. His phrase, regional triage, had come up again in climate talks about leaving places that are likely to flood. His call for incentives to get sterilized was repeated by controversial programs in developing countries that try to help people plan their families. The idea of balancing personal freedoms with social responsibility had even shown up in UN climate agreements and pandemic response plans, though the language was a little nicer. It was impossible to say for sure that Kirsten was behind these rules, but his words were there, sometimes word for word, hidden by clean language. As they dug deeper, it became clear that the Guidestones were not the end. They were just a practice run, a calm warm-up for a long game. He knew that his stones would make people angry, but he also knew that they would plant a seed. They would be seen by many. People would talk. And by the time his real plan came to light decades later, a lot of it was already part of public policy and discussion. When people finally learned more about the directive, they were outraged and angry right away. Historians were shocked at how close Kirsten had been to changing the next part of human history in secret. Every line of every paper was read carefully by reporters. People wanted to know how many of these ideas had already made it into world organizations. People were shocked that one man, hiding behind a fake name and a granite memorial, had been able to get his ideas into real-life conversations. And the question that everyone was thinking was just as scary. How much of Kirsten's plan is already here? Even though the Guidestones were destroyed, the night they were bombed raised even more questions.
A Georgia monument that some refer to as America's Stonehenge was destroyed yesterday in a pre-dawn bombing.
These included who did it, why the proof disappeared so quickly, and what groups were working behind the scenes to erase Kirsten's vision, or maybe to finish what he started. The day the stones fell. As planned, at 4:03 a.m. on July 6, 2022, the Georgia Guidestones were taken down. A security camera caught a shady figure moving quickly at the base of the monument in the dim light of dawn. The figure pressed something metal against the stone and then disappeared into the darkness. After a few seconds, there was a bright flash, and then an explosion that broke the quiet of the countryside. One of the slabs broke into dust and pieces, and the rest of the memorial stood broken and crooked, but not completely gone. The damage that was done should have been the start of an investigation. In reality, it was the end of the Guidestones' story, at least on the surface. In just a few hours, big equipment showed up. Before noon, bulldozers rolled over the field, picking up the trash, leveling the remains, and hauling everything away. The place that should have been a crime scene was more like a cleanup job. There was a memorial made of almost 2 million pounds of granite.
These standing stones are enormous and made of solid granite. When you're near them, they are genuinely impressive and imposing, the sort of thing that makes you wonder how ancient people ever managed to raise them up and to place them so precisely that they act as an astronomical calendar.
It was completely gone from the field in less than 8 hours, as if it had never been there. People who had been following the case for years knew right away that something wasn't right. But no one could say what happened to the car that was caught on tape. There was only one way to get in or out of that field. The car was a silver sedan that sped off after the explosion. But the video showed no license plate or the face of the driver, and it was not seen again on any nearby roads. It was gone as soon as it was out of the camera's view, like the morning fog swallowed it up. Police in Georgia said in a short statement that the bombing was an act of vandalism, and that it was probably done by a conspiracy theorist who didn't like what the statue said. The ATF agreed with the claim and said they were no longer involved without saying much else. After 2 weeks, the case was finally over. No suspects, no claims, and no court case. For a short time, that answer kept the news from going crazy. After that, the leaks began. There were internal GBI notes that said the bombing was more than just vandalism. They called it ideological suppression. Reporters who spoke out said that the agency had known for years who Kirsten was and what his full plans were. They also said that some people working on the investigation saw the statue not as a landmark, but as a liability. There was finally some noise about the case when an anonymously posted cryptic note showed up on a dark website. The monument was not a prophecy. It was just one phrase, but it spread like wildfire. It was time to go. A lot of new ideas came from that line. Some people thought the bomber was a vigilante who was angry at what they saw as the hypocrisy of elites who pushed for population decline while having spoilt lives. Others thought the blast was ordered from above and was part of a plan to hide Kirsten's vision before too many people found out. Still others were sure it was just a crazy conspiracy believer who didn't know what the stones meant. But there was no explanation for what came next. In just a few weeks, the town of Elberton took down the monument from its tourist brochures. It was walled off, the ground was smoothed out, and there was no sign of what had been there before. Local leaders refused to be interviewed. Calls about the Guidestones were no longer being taken by the Chamber of Commerce. It became clear over time that no one planned to rebuild them. The stones were no longer there. No one seemed eager to bring them back. What the Guidestones leave behind. There is now no one in the field where the Georgia Guidestones used to be. The ground where the big stones used to be is now fenced off, empty, and grassy where the stones used to be. There is no sign, plaque, or other evidence of what was there. It looks like nothing ever happened to people who walk by. It's just another part of rural Georgia. But for people who remember, the monument isn't as loud as the quiet that it leaves behind. Things changed right away when Kirsten's name was finally said. People had looked at the Guidestones as a puzzle or a curiosity for many years. But when the truth came out, the tone changed from mystery to danger, and from surprise to warning. The question of who built them was replaced by the question of how close he came to winning. People protested outside of government offices with signs that said, "500 million is not enough," which was a mean take on the first commandment on the monument. Skeptics wanted official probes into population councils, globalist think tanks, and the UN's part in making quiet policies that matched Kirsten's ideas. A lot of smart people argued in TV shows and lecture halls about whether his visions were caused by real evil or just idealism gone too far. It was impossible to ignore how hypocritical the elites he sided with were. Men like Rockefeller, Shockley, and even Kirsten himself had pushed for population limits and genetic control for decades, even as they had their own big families and made a lot of money in businesses that hurt the environment they were supposed to protect. The public thought it was the worst kind of betrayal. Rules for everyone else but them. As reporters found Kirsten's words in modern policy papers, climate strategies, and public health laws, their fear grew. He slowly but surely came to the realization that his ideas hadn't died with him. After being packed, they were put somewhere out of sight, so no one would see them. If this story left you questioning everything, like, share, and subscribe for more. Don't stop here. Click on the next video popping up now to uncover even deeper hidden truths.